The next step in our hacking methodology is scanning. And with scanning, what we're after is looking to see if we can map out the network and discover what's on it, what applications are running, what ports, protocols, and services, and maybe even figure out what kind of applications and operating systems are out there. Scanning a network basically is the first real active action that we might take as an attacker. Up until this point, most of the things we've done have been either passive or, at worst, non-intrusive. We really haven't contacted the target very much in an intrusive way. Scanning basically is the act of sending network traffic, particularly crafted network traffic, to a host or even an entire network to get responses back from that network or that host. And the responses you would get back can give you details about what's running on the network and how it's set up. The goals of scanning include determining how many live hosts there are on the network and which ones are up and running, what ports, protocols, and services they are running, and, if possible, getting the OS and application versions from the devices. If we have all this information, what we want to do is use it to figure out what vulnerabilities are out there for the hosts and the network. Now, we can scan over basically any network connection, but often, unfortunately, we'll wind up scanning across the internet, so we'll be going through a wide range of devices. So some of the information that you got during the footprinting stage will be helpful. The IP address of the target, the DNS domain name, and so forth. You also could scan via a wireless network if you're within range of that particular target network and they use wireless. Now, targets are the network devices and the hosts. The goal is to get port, protocol, service information, and even banner information so that we can figure out what the possible vulnerabilities are. When we say banner information, some applications and operating systems actually give up a little bit about themselves when you do a scan. In other words, you can scan a particular box, and depending upon the operating system or application that's running on it, it might give up something like an error message or a response that you could use to figure out what's actually running on the box. Now, several different types of scans are available for you to use. It really depends on what your goals are, what you intend to get out of it, and also whether you want to be stealthy or not. Some scans are better suited for when you want to avoid intrusion detection systems or avoid getting caught scanning. So, you may use one or more of these methods when you're scanning a target. You don't have to limit yourself to one method. Now, as far as tools go, there are probably hundreds of tools out there available for scanning. I will tell you that most of them work very similarly, and they offer varying degrees of features. Some of these tools are all-in-one types of tools where they can do footprinting, scanning, vulnerability scanning, and so forth. But some of the basic tools that you'll run into, Nmap and Nessus in particular, are really designed to do one or two things, but they are the best tools out there to do what they do. You'll find some tools that actually use Nmap, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes, to scan a network, and they just provide a really nice front end. One of your goals also should be to avoid detection by intrusion detection systems, as I mentioned earlier. In some cases, you may not care if people know if you're scanning them, but in a lot of cases, you will. You'll want to be able to scan without getting caught. Now, the use of IP spoofing, proxies, and so forth will help you in scanning stealthily and avoiding detection, and we'll talk about those a little bit later as we go as well. So let's look at the goals of scanning. We want to get open ports. We want to get closed ports even, because if the port is closed, that can tell us a little bit of information. In some cases, it can help us determine what the operating system is based upon whether the port is open or closed. We also want protocol information. We want to know if it's running HTTP or FTP, for example. Any network services that are out there, DNS, for example, that would help us to understand what's going on in the network. If we can get any configuration details, that's a plus. Any banners that might help us fingerprint the operating system and applications would be great. If we can get information on what a particular web server is running, such as a particular version of Apache or Internet Information Services, that can help us out as well. Because obviously once we get this information, then we can start researching vulnerabilities to figure out what we can do, what attack vectors we can take. Now, some of the techniques we'll cover over the next several segments include things like full open scans, where they're a little bit noisy and we don't care if we get caught, but also we'll talk about half open and stealth scans, which are usually used to avoid detection. We'll talk about TCP flag scans, ICMP and UDP scans, and we'll cover a little bit about evading IDSs, spoofing your IPs, and the use of proxies. We'll talk about all these things over the next several segments when we discuss scanning. We'll also give you some demonstrations on two of the popular scanning and vulnerability scanning tools, Nmap and Nessus. So we've got a lot to talk about over the next several sessions.